19,000 people. That's how many human beings have vanished into WITSEC since 1971. Each one of them signed the MOU. Each one stood on the witness stand. Each one gave up everything, in exchange for a chance at survival. And then they disappeared. So the question is, after all of that, where are they? Nobody, not even the U.S. Marshal Service, will publicly answer that question. But through court filings, declassified records, and rare interviews with former witnesses, we can piece together a picture. And that picture is far more complicated than what the government wants you to believe. This is the final episode of our three-part series. In episode 1, we covered the 3 a.m. knock. In episode 2, we went inside the contract itself. Today we answer the question all previous episodes have been leading to. After you disappear, after you testify, after the trials end, after the stipend checks stop, what happens next? Let's start with the ones who actually made it. Do they exist? Yes. But they don't look like what you imagine. They're not rich. They're not famous. They are anonymous, and that's the entire point. Success in WITSEC is not measured by wealth or happiness. It's measured by a single metric. You're still alive and nobody knows who you really are. A representative case, a former cartel liaison in Texas. He testified against 8 defendants, all convicted. Entered WITSEC in 1998 with a new identity. Today, nearly 30 years later, he works as an auto mechanic in a small Midwestern town. Married, his wife has no idea about his past. 2 grown children. Never had a single arrest under his new identity. This is a WITSEC success story, but read that sentence again. His wife has no idea. That's not a marriage, that's a 30-year performance. The U.S. Marshal Service estimates approximately 3,000 active witnesses at any given time, including their family members who are also brought into the program. In total, over 19,000 people have entered since the program began. Of those, the Marshal Service claims not a single person who followed all the rules has ever been harmed. But the actual number of people who have died, including those who left the program or were removed, is a figure the government does not release. And there's a good reason for that. There are witnesses who have grown old inside the program, literally. People who entered at 25 and are now 75, 50 years under a fake name. They've lived most of their lives as someone else. The question at this point is no longer, can you survive? It's whose life did you live? When a 75-year-old man dies under a false identity, who actually died? The person born 75 years ago, or the person manufactured by the government 50 years ago? And here is one of the brutal realities of WITSEC. The most successful people are the ones who become completely ordinary, unremarkable, invisible in plain sight. They choose jobs where nobody asks about your past. Plumber, low-level office worker, truck driver. They live in houses nobody visits. They make no close friends. They decline every photo invitation. Every day is a performance. And they've been performing it for decades. Now let's talk about the ones who didn't make it. We covered Joseph Barboza in episode 1, the mafia hitman. The first person ever protected shot dead outside his San Francisco apartment in 1976 because he couldn't leave the old life behind. But Barboza wasn't an isolated case. There's a long list of names, many of which you'll never hear, of people who entered the program and never came out. Not because they successfully disappeared, because they died. Brenda Paz, 17 years old, MS-13 member, 4 months pregnant when she was stabbed 16 times and dumped in the Shenandoah River. She left WITSEC voluntarily, unable to endure the isolation at age 17. But here's the question the Marshal Service doesn't want to answer. Does a 17-year-old child, separated from everything she's ever known, truly make a voluntary choice when leaving the program? Or was the system designed for adults and simply failed a child? In 1998, a witness, we'll call him David, testified against a crime organization in New York. 4 defendants got life sentences. David entered WITSEC, relocated to rural Oregon. He followed every clause. But 9 years later, 9 years of total isolation, he was found dead in his rented home. Cause of death, suicide. No investigator calls this a program failure, but David didn't die at the hands of the mafia. He died under the weight of the very isolation the program designed. There are no official statistics on WITSEC suicides because the Marshal Service doesn't track people who leave the program. But interviews with former marshals, employees, and psychologists who worked with the program indicate rates of severe depression, anxiety disorders, and PTSD among WITSEC witnesses are significantly higher than the general population. Total social isolation, the program's primary protective tool, is also the single fastest destroyer of the human psyche. And in the 21st century, an entirely new threat emerged, the temptation of digital connection. A former WITSEC witness, 15 years under a new identity without incident, created a fake Instagram account in 2019 just to view his sister's photos. No posts, no messages, just viewing. Within 6 months, Meta's AI recommended his account to old friends. One recognized the background in an accidentally captured photo, a distinctive building in the city where he lived. 3 months later, gunmen found him. He survived, but the program didn't. He was removed from WITSEC for violating Clause 3, contact with the past. The government doesn't care about your intentions. They only care about your actions. There's a third category of people almost nobody talks about, the voluntary exits. Not because they committed a crime, not because they were exposed, because they simply couldn't endure the life anymore. These people walk out of the program, return to their real identities, and vanish from every official statistic. Nobody counts them, nobody tracks them, and nobody knows how many of them are still alive. This is the gray zone of WITSEC, and it's much larger than you think. Based on interviews with former marshals, an estimated 5 to 10% of witnesses voluntarily leave the program within the first 5 years. That number sounds small until you multiply it by 19,000. That's roughly 950 to 1,900 people. Human beings, not statistics, who decided the price of safety was simply too high. They'd rather face the danger with their real identity than continue living as a ghost. This is not a crazy decision. This is a sober calculation about what makes a life worth living. Those who leave describe a specific breaking point. It's not when they were most afraid. It's when they realize fear had become their entire life. Every morning waking up not with, what do I want to do today? But with, will I be discovered today? Every doorbell ring, a panic attack. Every stranger looking at them too long makes their heart stop. That's not living. That's existing. And there's an enormous difference. The cruelest irony, people who leave the program can't seek help. They can't join support groups for former WITSEC witnesses. Such groups don't exist for security reasons. They can't talk to a therapist about their real experience without revealing their real identity. They are completely alone, not just isolated from their past, but isolated from anyone who could possibly understand what they've been through. So after 3 episodes, after all these stories, what's the final answer? Is WITSEC a good program? It depends on how you define good. If you define good as effective at putting criminals in prison, then yes, WITSEC is one of the most successful tools in American criminal justice history. But if you define good as humane, the answer gets a lot more complicated. This program reveals a deeper truth about how the American justice system operates. The government is willing to erase an entire human identity, legally, socially, and psychologically, in exchange for courtroom testimony. It's a transaction so cold it's almost impossible to believe when you actually stop and think about it. But the system was not designed to be humane. It was designed to be effective. 19,000 people signed their name on that document. Every one of them made the same calculation. My old life versus a chance at staying alive. And every one of them disappeared into a world where they exist on paper, but not in any memory, any photograph, any story told about who they really were. This is WITSEC. This is what happens behind that door. Thank you for watching the full 3-part series on the Witness Protection Program. If you want more investigative deep dives into America's hidden systems, subscribe to Declassified. The most important stories are the ones they don't want you to know.